I'm Douglas Mason, CEO of Naturally Splendid, symbol NSP on the TSX Venture Exchange. Naturally Splendid is a biotechnology and consumer products company focused on the global cannabis and health markets. Naturally Splendid is expanding distribution in this rapidly growing market with products currently in Canada, the USA, South Korea, Germany, and Australia. To view our comprehensive company presentation and for more information, please visit our website at naturallysplendid.com.
You're listening to HowStreet.com radio, available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Welcome to HowStreet.com radio, the online source for market opinions. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Stewart Muir, Executive Director of the ResourceWorks Society. Welcome back to the show, Stewart.
Hey, thanks, Jim.
Stewart, LNG, why is next year going to be a big year for energy and natural gas in British Columbia?
Well, 2018 was a very good year for liquefied natural gas when it comes to Canada. If you look at the last few years, there hasn't been globally much new investment into LNG plants. The big projects in Australia, Qatar, in Africa, those were a few years back, and there's been a little bit of a drought there. Part of it is because of the crash in oil prices worldwide, but we are forecasting a huge increase over coming decades in natural gas use in markets where they don't have their own natural gas. And that means LNG because it can be shipped in easily. And that's China, where natural gas can be used to replace coal. And so the result is less climate emissions, fewer GHGs. And that's obviously desirable for everybody in the world. So as Canada becomes a player there, we are seeing a whole bunch of projects that are lined up on the west coast of Canada and some elsewhere that are ready to go. And in October, we had the LNG Canada project, $40 billion project, go ahead. That's big news. A lot of excitement on that. But I think we're going to see stirrings from wood fiber LNG, and then there's a couple of others. And I was at a conference last week in Calgary, and it looks like there are probably a total of 5 LNG projects in addition to LNG Canada, that are being talked about by the investment community in Canada as ones that could go ahead.
Why is Canada now booming with LNG? Why the laggard behind the rest of the world?
Well, I think part of it is that we weren't ready for the first wave of LNG. Partly we were a little bit slow in getting off the mark. Not necessarily a bad thing. A lot of people were disappointed that we couldn't get the Pacific Northwest LNG across the finish line a couple of years ago, and other opportunities were slower to develop. But on the other hand, we do need things like pipelines to carry the natural gas from the inland, northeast BC, where the gas is, out to the coast. So you've got to build those things. You'll also have to build these massively costly and complex plants on the coast. Essentially, think of them as giant refrigerators. It's going to cool down the gas so it can be poured onto a ship and shipped away. All of this is new infrastructure, unlike places, say, in southern USA that have got the ability to take age-old infrastructure, turn it into LNG export terminals, and away they go. It's been much easier for them to turn that on. So that's another factor. Also, I think our environmental process is here because we have so much legal protection for everything that happens on the landscape, which ultimately is a good thing, but it doesn't mean our processes can be slower. And also we have a complicating factor that a lot of countries either don't have at all or they manage very differently, which is we have probably the most enlightened legal system to benefit Indigenous people in this country. And since many of those people are on the same rural lands where the resource activities are, it takes a lot of time to make sure everything gets done right. And if you take the case of the LNG Canada project, they've got a pipeline. It's crossing through something like 20 First Nations. In every single case, the pipeline crosses. The local First Nations governments have got legal agreements with pipeline. They've worked many years to achieve that, and that's why we see so much in First Nations support for the pipeline right now. But as far as the longer-term potential goes, well, it's not just LNG Canada. I mentioned the wood fiber LNG. That's up towards Squamish. If you're driving up to Whistler, look to the left there before you hit Squamish, and you can see the remnants of the old pulp and paper plant. That's what is going to be an LNG plant. But then you've got a second one up at Kitimat, which is where LNG Canada is. And then there's the Steelhead, or Quispa LNG, as it's also now called, on the west coast of Vancouver Island. And there's actually other ones, but those are probably the main ones on the west coast. And then there's the Goldboro one down in Nova Scotia that is exciting to a lot of people too, because that could get us our western natural gas, could get it into Europe, into a place like Poland, where they need to have that gas. You know, the Polish National Energy Company, they've actually set up an office in Calgary. They're so interested in making sure they are at the cutting edge of LNG deals and technology. So, you know, that's going to happen. Europe doesn't like to get all its gas from Russia. You can guess why that might be. And so here's Canada as a global emerging player in LNG. It's pretty exciting stuff.
We'll have more with Stewart Muir right after this.
I'm Greg Johnston, CEO of Carl Data Solutions, an industrial Internet of Things company that provides big data solutions for monitoring critical infrastructure. Carl Data offers machine learning and predictive analytics features through our cloud-based applications to deliver key asset-saving operational insights from massive amounts of data. Carl Data trades on the CSE, symbol CRL, and the pink symbol CDTAF. For more details on Carl Data, please visit carlsolutions.com.
Media recognition from Bloomberg, Reuters, Recycling Trade Publications. Patented process for 100% recovery of critical metals, including cobalt, lithium, nickel, manganese, aluminum. American Manganese is focused on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. American Manganese trades on the TSX Venture, AMY, the US, AMYZF, and Frankfurt 2AM. For more information, visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Stewart Muir. Stewart, why is Alberta so cranky these days?
Oh boy, now that's a question. I mean, you look at the premier; she is, I would say, fit to be tied. We had the premiers conference last week, where the coalition of premiers who have questions and concerns about the carbon pricing regime. You know, they had one point of view. You had the energy producing provinces, and then you had Quebec. You know, in this Confederate mixture that we've got right now, it seems as if there's a lot of growing resentment in Alberta about the fact that Quebec, under the equalization system we've got, because they have probably just about the lowest incomes in the country, the whole basis of Canadian Confederation is that we have a system that equalizes that. So people in Calgary, where the average wage is something like $97,000, they're going to subsidize the people in Quebec who make only $59,000, so that everyone is kind of equal. And, you know, that is a system that has worked out okay, but when there's other stresses, I think there can be a perception that it's unfair. Now, Alberta is really the economic engine room of Canada. It's a fact that some people are really proud of. It's a fact that some people are very critical of, because, of course, it's based on the oil and gas economy, which is under so much pressure these days to adapt, evolve. Some say to go away. Others, like me, say, no, we've got to keep it. We can't live without the essential hydrocarbon fuels that have allowed civilization to develop the way it has. Nevertheless, Alberta is very, very important, and it spins off so much benefit. You know, hundreds of billions of dollars over the years flow to Ottawa. Ottawa distributes it around so everyone gets equal. And I think a lot of people are seeing that Quebec not only gets a goodly equal share, some say more, but it also lately in the whole national energy conversation has proved to not be interested in helping Alberta. Very happy to get the money, but not happy to help the country, which I think is a bit of a problem when you see I think the moral quandary, the fact that we're giving away our oil in the West for less than it's worth to American traders to get rich off. And we could reach its full price if only we could get that to either the Pacific or the Atlantic or another ocean where it could be, you know, put onto the global marketplace and thus fetch its fair market value. And it's really in the West, it's British Columbia government that's preventing this from happening for Canada. In the East, it's Quebec that's preventing it from happening because they have not been cooperative with the Energy East pipeline. Now, one of the ironies here, of course, is that every single day Quebec is equipped with its gasoline from countries like Kazakhstan and Nigeria that, you want to see those countries get ahead and prosper, but at the same time, let's recognize that these countries are run by the most corrupt regimes in the world. I was looking recently at where they stand in the worldwide corruption rankings, pretty much near the bottom. And yet Alberta, which has the world's best amongst the, top 2 or 3 countries in the world in terms of environmental and social practices in oil and gas development, it gets no respect at all from Quebec. At the same time, the Canadian system forces Alberta to send its money to Quebec, billions and billions of dollars. So,
do you find it ironic, Stewart, do you find it ironic Quebec has suffered the worst disaster caused by rail tanker cars, probably, in North American history, and yet they don't want to use safer pipelines?
Well, that's right. The Lake Mégantic was an explosion that killed
40 people dead.
40 people. It was caused by a rail a train of oil by rail cars that were coming from North Dakota. They had a lighter mix of a highly volatile type of crude oil that was going eastward on a line that some later said was not that well maintained, and it blew up. Now, if you had an all-Canadian route pipeline carrying Canadian oil, this would be safely buried underground, best possible technology available today. It wouldn't have that sort of volatility, and it would not only travel safely and no danger to anybody, but it would also benefit all of Canada by ensuring we're getting a fair return. What's not to like about that? There are so many dimensions in which Canada is shooting itself in the foot by not doing the right thing on this.
Now, we also know pipelines are not restricted to carrying just one product. They can switch back and forth. Well, Ontario right now with super high hydro rates, it costs a fortune to heat your home with electricity there. Wouldn't they like to have more Western Canadian natural gas come to their homes so they could use a cheaper form of energy there?
Oh, yeah. And I think natural gas in the future, when you're concerned, as I think everyone should be, about climate change, the renewables that everyone talks about over in Poland. This week we've had representatives from around the world at the COP21 process to review and reach new agreements on climate action. If you want to have renewables in your mix that are zero emission, one of the facts of the physics is that you have to have a backup, because when the sun goes down and solar panels aren't getting any sunshine, well, what are you going to do? Well, what people are doing around the world to make their renewables work is have natural gas as the backup. So if you want to have, 1 unit of wind or solar electricity, that's fine, but you've got to have 1 unit of reliable electricity coming from natural gas. And this is something that I don't think everyone realizes yet, because there's the sense that you replace fossil fuels with renewables. Well, it doesn't really work that way. That's not what anyone is doing. And I think over time, this could change, but we have to just continue to strive on this. But at the moment, natural gas is that big solution. And it's kind of ironic too that Quebec says, well, we don't want your oil. You know what? They've got natural gas. They have 21 trillion cubic feet believed natural gas reserves under their feet of Quebec in the northern branch of the Utica Shale, which is the one, if you think of all the gas development down in places like Pennsylvania in the northeast of the USA, that same geological formation actually extends up into Quebec and into the St. Lawrence Trench, and that could very easily be accessed. And probably a majority, according to polls I've seen, of Quebecers would support doing that. But I think the premier, the mayor of Montreal, these are very powerful political figures. It seems like the environmentalists who are very short-term in their thinking on this issue have those politicians wrapped around their baby fingers.
Well, we know how corrupt it is in Quebec with the mob and the bikers and so on running things. Do you think they make a lot of money if they're using corrupt imported oil?
Well, it certainly gives one wonder. I mean, none of it makes sense. You know, you can have a good, solid, clean Canadian product from Western Canada. You can have a safe pipeline so that towns like Mégantic are not endangered. You could have the satisfaction of knowing that you're rewarding the honest people of Western Canada rather than the corrupt dictators of certain countries they're using now. Why wouldn't the good people of Quebec recognize that? You know, it raises a question. I haven't seen any evidence on it, but I did see last week that the Sûreté de Québec, the provincial police force of Quebec, took delivery of a $850,000 armored vehicle that's got this big point at the front that is going to be used as a platform for busting into the Hells Angels compounds. That's how bad it is there, that they need to get essentially basically a specially designed tank. It's got a platform on top for the armored officers to ride in on, and they just, they're going to be able to go into Rivière, where some of the nasty ones are, and, you know, fight their way in. Could you imagine that happening in Burnaby? I mean, we've got some gangs in the West, but they do it on a whole new level, whole different level in Quebec.
We'll have more with Stewart Muir right after this.
Cypress Development Corp's flagship lithium project is located just east of Albemarle's Silver Peak mine in the heart of Clayton Valley, Nevada. A 12-hole exploration drill program for lithium-enriched claystone on Cypress's 100% controlled properties is now underway. Cypress Development Corp trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol CYP, the Pink's CYDVF, and on Frankfurt's C1Z1. For more information, please visit our website, cypressdevelopmentcorp.com.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Stewart Muir. Stewart, you have a policy for climate change maybe that people might be interested in. What is it?
Well, look, I'm a pragmatist when it comes to climate. I would like to see policies that are effective. Right now I see that all of this carbon discussion seems to be in the domain of economists and policy wonks who toil away in their ivory towers, not much experience, background in how the world works, you know, coming at it from someone who is a conservationist, who is a resource specialist, who, like me, I've spent a lot of years working with people in journalism to find out what it is that concerns regular folks on issues. And I see a big disconnect. I mean, in BC, we've had a carbon tax in place for 10 years. Recently, it was changed from being revenue neutral to being as of 2020, it will be a $2 billion a year, basically a sales tax on fuels that are sold. It used to be that revenue was returned to people for their good behavior on using fossil fuels responsibly, but now it's really just flowing into government coffers, and maybe some of it will be returned to green initiatives, but we don't really have any specifics or rules on that. So really, it's an extra $2 billion sales tax. How is that helping us to lower greenhouse gas emissions is totally beyond me. And yet I see so many of these experts who murmur amongst themselves about the brilliant Nobel Prize winning schemes they have to get these systems going, but they're not making a darn bit of difference at all. So I do come at it from a more practical point of view, Jim, and I think that there's a few things we need to do. I've actually recently published a piece that's getting a lot of comments. I call it 12 steps we can take to have a practical climate solution. It's at the ResourceWorks website. You can read it. But just to give you a few highlights, I mean, the number one thing we can do in British Columbia is get as much of our LNG, our natural gas, to where it's needed right now, which is Asia, China, Japan, Korea, even later to India, certainly to Malaysia. These people are desperately looking for solutions to lower their greenhouse gas emissions. The populations of most of these countries are much, much, much bigger than Canada's, and therefore they have higher emissions. These are emerging economies that are very quickly coming up to the same living standards as we have in Canada, And of course that entails using more energy, which entails having more byproducts of energy, which right now means, of course, more emissions. So we can help those countries lower their emissions. If we just removed, say, ourselves, if we stopped emitting anything tomorrow, all of us just stopped emitting, that would be, maybe a couple of days of Asian emissions. It wouldn't make a darn bit of difference to the global picture. So I think if we can develop not only LNG Canada, which is now happening, thankfully, but also the, Kitimat LNG, the Steelhead LNG, the wood fiber LNG, there's 4 projects right there in BC. We get those going quickly. We can actually be a true global climate leader. If we don't do that, anything we do, we could drive a little bit less, we could pay more carbon tax, all that stuff doesn't really make a darn bit of difference. We're too small, we're insignificant in our own activities. Not that we shouldn't, of course, try to always get better. So that's one thing, okay? So there's another thing, which is innovation. You hear all of this talk, we have to get rid of fossil fuels. We have to leave oil and gas in the ground. Well, actually, that's completely upside down and wrong. Stored chemical energy, which is what hydrocarbons are, is what has allowed humanity to become what it is today. There's no other way that we could have this elimination of the degradation of women, of infant mortality, of widespread disease, of famine, of cold. These are things we've eradicated only because we've made good use of fossil fuels. Unfortunately, of course, that is not to say there's not the negatives. And so through science and innovation, managing those negatives, whether it's removing CO2 from the air, whether it is stopping CO2 from getting into the air, whether it is turning CO2, carbon dioxide, into a product that we use for other things. And that's happening. There's a new project that the Dutch government and the Netherlands is funding that will do that. Just announced today. Very interesting stuff. So that's about science and innovation, always getting better. And eventually, we will have in this country the 0 carbon barrel of oil. And I know there's some people who say, what are you talking about? You need to be thinking ahead. 10 years ago, we didn't even have iPhones. Just think about what's happened in a mere decade in terms of the advance of technology. A lot of the talk around renewables is good. It's fine. But the scale of humanity's use of fossil fuels is so much that we just can't ignore innovating in fossil fuels. If we fail to do that, we really are in big trouble. Between now and 2030, the amount of coal used to create electricity is going to continually increase. And it's not until about 2035 that we can expect to see that to tail off. But even then, natural gas will be what's increasing. And it's only because of natural gas. And even in 15 years, 20 years, the renewable space, things like solar and wind, which are great, but they're very, very small now. They'll be bigger. They'll be exponentially bigger in 20 years, but they will still be very, very small on a global basis. And so that's sort of the reality. And I think there's a lot of, a lot of younger people that come out of school. Their teachers have been telling them, we're going to get rid of fossil fuels and you're going to have windmills. It's going to be a wonderful, wonderful world. Well, the sad fact is that's really it's fantasy right now. Not to say we shouldn't be innovating there. I'm not saying that at all. But we do have to deal with the fact that 85% of all our energy that we use totally in the world today comes from fossil fuels, and we can't just switch that off.
Stewart, thank you so much for chatting with us.
Thank you, Jim.
My guest has been Stewart Muir, Executive Director of the Resource Works Society. His website, resourceworks.com. You're listening to HowStreet.com radio. Find us on Twitter at HowStreet. Our popular YouTube channel is Talk Digital Network. Questions for the show or our guests, like Stewart, can be sent to info@HowStreet.com. I'm Jim Goddard. Thanks for listening.
Comments made on HowStreet.com radio are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any matter whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. HowStreet.com radio is a production of HowStreet Media Incorporated.